There comes a moment in every generation when the lost must find their way home, not to a building, not to a country on a map, but to a truth buried deep within their identity. For centuries, people of African descent scattered across continents have lived with a question pulsing quietly within their souls. Where do I truly belong? This question is more than curiosity. It is the cry of a people who have endured displacement, who have built nations far from their origin, and yet have always felt an invisible thread tugging them back to something ancient, something powerful, the spirit of home. For many, that thread leads to the Yoruba and Igbo homelands, places where civilization, philosophy, and spiritual understanding once flowed like rivers before foreign ships arrived on the coasts. These weren't just tribes, they were entire worlds of wisdom, discipline, and divine creativity. The Yoruba spoke of destiny and purpose, of how every human being carried within them a spark called ori, a spiritual compass guiding their life's path. The Igbo believed in chi, the divine essence that connects each person to the Creator and to their community. Both peoples shared a deep understanding that life was not an accident, it was a responsibility. To live was to contribute. To create, to honor your ancestors through your works and through your heart. When the diaspora, the children of those taken, scattered, and enslaved, began to awaken, they didn't just rediscover their names or languages, they began to rediscover this truth that they were not broken. They were displaced but not destroyed. They were suppressed but not erased. The world had tried to teach them to forget their worth, to see themselves as orphans of history, but in reality, they were heirs to civilizations that predated empires. The rebirth of a people began not with a political movement, but with memory. The moment when a people began to remember who they truly were before the world told them who to be. It is said that when a tree forgets its roots, it dies slowly. The African diaspora for too long tried to grow in foreign soil, watered by cultures that misunderstood their spirit. But something miraculous began to happen in the last century, a stirring of consciousness. The music, the art, the rhythm of the people began to whisper of Africa again. Through drumming, through dance, through spoken word and storytelling, through hair, fashion, and philosophy, they began to reach for their original rhythm. Each act of cultural reclamation became an act of resistance, a declaration that said, we are still here. We remember. The rebirth of a people is not only physical, it is spiritual and intellectual. When the descendants of Africa began to study their history beyond the colonial textbooks, they realized something astonishing, that their ancestors were not savages rescued by civilization, but visionaries who built civilizations of their own. The Yoruba city of Ife was producing art of breathtaking sophistication when Europe was still in the Dark Ages. The Igbo practiced democratic principles in their villages long before the concept was coined in the Western world. These people were scientists, astronomers, philosophers, builders, and their descendants have carried that same brilliance across oceans. This awakening became a bridge connecting the diaspora to the homeland. When people from the Americas, the Caribbean, and Europe began visiting Nigeria and rediscovering the Yoruba and Igbo lands, something beyond tourism happened. It was like memory returning to the body. The soil recognized them. The people welcomed them not as strangers but as family returning from a long exile. Tears were shed not of sadness but of reunion, for after hundreds of years a people divided by force were finding each other again through choice. That is the power of rebirth. It transforms tragedy into purpose. To be reborn is not to erase the past but to transform it. The transatlantic slave trade was one of humanity's greatest crimes, but out of that darkness, a new light is rising. The diaspora born in foreign lands has carried fragments of African identity across generations, in song, in spirit, in resilience. They have turned pain into power, and now as they reconnect with the Yoruba and Igbo roots, they bring back not only remembrance but renew the knowledge of technology, education, global experience. These are gifts the diaspora now offers back to the homeland. It is the full circle of history, the sons and daughters returning home not empty-handed but bearing the fruits of endurance. The rebirth of a people is not a simple journey. It is filled with questions, identity crises, and emotional storms. Many from the diaspora who travel to Africa expecting paradise are met with the reality of modern challenges, poverty, corruption, and misunderstanding. Yet even in that there is beauty, because rebirth is never clean or easy. It requires patience. It requires love. It requires healing on both sides. The homeland must learn to embrace its returning children without suspicion, and the diaspora must learn to see Africa not through the eyes of fantasy but of responsibility. Rebirth means work. It means rebuilding systems, reconnecting families, and restoring pride not through arrogance but through understanding. In this age of technology, that reconnection is happening faster than ever before. DNA tests are revealing lineages long buried. Young people are tracing their ancestry to the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Akan, the Congo. They are learning the languages, studying the traditions, wearing the symbols, and most importantly embracing the mindset of their ancestors, one that valued community, integrity, and purpose above material wealth. For in Yoruba and Igbo cultures, the measure of a person was never how much they owned, but how well they served. The diaspora, after centuries of surviving systems built on greed and division, is slowly remembering that to be African is to live with me. This is what the rebirth represents, a restoration of dignity. When a people reconnect to their roots, they stand taller, they speak with confidence, they understand that their skin is not a curse but a crown. The rebirth of the diaspora is not about rejecting the world, but about enriching it with the wisdom of their ancestors. It is about teaching the world that identity is strength, and that when you know who you are, no force on earth can make you feel small again. Look at the art being made, the music being sung, the stories being told today by people of African descent. There is a new energy in it, a pulse that feels ancient yet modern, African yet global. It is the echo of the drums of the Yoruba and the songs of the Igbo reborn in new form. Every Afrobeat song, every African-inspired film, every cultural movement that celebrates Black pride, these are the languages of rebirth. They are proof that what was meant to be silenced has found its voice again. And what a voice it is. The world is listening. The world is learning that the story of Africa is not one of pity but of power. The rebirth of the diaspora is reshaping global consciousness. It is teaching the world about balance between past and future, between self and community. It is reminding humanity that greatness is not born from dominance, but from harmony. The Yoruba and Igbo understood that life was about alignment with your destiny, with your community, and with your creation. When the diaspora embraces this truth, they stop chasing validation from systems that were never built for them. They begin to build new systems, rooted in justice, love, and truth. The rebirth is also personal. Each individual who rediscovers their roots is like a seed finding its soil again. You may have grown far away from home. You may have forgotten your true name, but the essence of who you are has never left you. The blood of kings, queens, farmers, poets, and warriors runs through you. The same spirit that built kingdoms runs in your veins. You are not the descendant of slaves. You are the descendant of survivors, of dreamers, of inventors, of divine creators. Your ancestors did not die for you to walk in shame. They endured so that one day you could stand tall and say, I know who I am. When the diaspora finally returns, not just physically but spiritually, something world-changing will happen. The Yoruba and Igbo lands will not just welcome them, they will evolve with them. New ideas, new technology, and new energy will merge with ancient wisdom. Together they will build schools that teach the truth of their history, industries that honor their resources, and communities that live by purpose instead of profit. This is how a people rise again, through unity, through knowledge, through faith in their own identity. The rebirth of a people is not a dream. It is happening right now, in the music we hear, in the names we reclaim, in the pride we feel, in the journeys we take back to the homeland. The Yoruba and Igbo are not just chapters in the past, they are the blueprint of the future. The diaspora's return is not an ending, it is a new beginning, one written in the language of strength, resilience, and love. And so the call goes out to every descendant of Africa. Come home, if not with your body then with your heart. Reconnect with your essence, study your history, speak your truth. For the time has come to rise again, not as scattered souls but as one people reborn in purpose and in pride. The journey may be long but the destination is already written. The same stars that guided your ancestors still shine above you. They are calling you to remember who you are, the living proof of survival, the rebirth of a nation, the heartbeat of a people who finally found their way home. The rebirth of a people begins when memory returns, when the forgotten melodies of heritage begin to hum again in the soul. The moment the diaspora remembers its true origin, something profound awakens. It is not just the rediscovery of a birthplace or an ancestral line. It is the reawakening of a heartbeat that has echoed through generations of silence. Reconnecting with Yoruba and Igbo roots is far more than an act of cultural nostalgia. It is resurrection. It is the process of bringing back to life what was buried under centuries of disconnection, of restoring identity, dignity, and destiny that no empire, no oppression, no distance could truly destroy. When a people remember who they are, they cease to be lost. They rise not because the world grants them permission, but because their spirit demands recognition. For hundreds of years, those of African descent have carried within them fragments of memory, fragments of languages they never learned, rhythms they could not explain, values and instincts that echoed something ancient and powerful. That memory was not gone, it was sleeping, waiting for a generation with enough courage to awaken it. Every song sung in pain, every poem written in exile, every dance step that carried the pulse of drums no one remembered hearing, all of it was the whisper of ancestors saying, "Come back, remember us, remember yourself." Reconnection, then, is not merely a cultural project, it is the restoration of wholeness. It is a spiritual rebirth in the truest sense of the word, a return to balance and truth. When a person from the diaspora steps foot on Yoruba or Igbo soil for the first time, something unexplainable happens. The air feels familiar, the faces seem known, even without understanding the language, the heart understands the energy. That moment is more than travel, it is time folding in on itself. The centuries between the ancestors taken and the descendants returning collapse into one heartbeat. The land recognizes its children, and the children recognize their home. Tears fall not only for the pain of the past, but for the beauty of the reconnection. It is the living proof that despite forced migration, despite stolen names and rewritten histories, identity cannot die, it only waits to be remembered. Reconnection is resurrection because it brings back the essence of a people that history tried to silence. The Yoruba concept of Ori, the divine head that guides one's destiny, and the Igbo understanding of Chi, the personal spirit that connects one to the Creator, both remind us that every human being carries purpose within. These ancient philosophies survived not in books but in the blood and instincts of the diaspora, that unshakable resilience, that faith in destiny, that instinct for freedom. All of it was inherited. It was passed down through lullabies, through struggle, through the unspoken pride of survival. When the diaspora returns to these philosophies, they are not learning something new, they are remembering something eternal. But this resurrection is not only individual, it is collective. When communities in the diaspora reconnect with their ancestral homelands, they bring with them knowledge, innovation, and global experience. They merge ancient wisdom with modern understanding. The Yoruba and Igbo lands in turn provide the spiritual and cultural foundation that grounds that knowledge in identity and purpose. This fusion is not just cultural, it gives birth to a new generation of thinkers, builders and dreamers, who carry both the fire of their ancestors and the tools of the present. Reconnection becomes the bridge between past and future, between tradition and progress. Resurrection also means healing. Centuries of separation created wounds that could not be treated by time alone. The diaspora struggled with identity, constantly fighting for recognition in foreign lands. Meanwhile, the homeland struggled with its own scars, colonialism, division, and cultural erosion. Reconnection allows both sides to heal together. The diaspora learns that Africa is not a myth or a story, it is a living, breathing mother waiting to embrace her children. The homeland learns that those who return are not outsiders. They are fragments of itself returning with gifts, resources, and renewed vision. In that reunion, healing flows like water through dry soil. When a people reconnect, they begin to rewrite their story. The narrative shifts from loss to legacy, from pain to power. Reconnection transforms the image of the African and the diaspora from victims of history to victors of endurance. It restores pride, not arrogance, but pride rooted in truth. Pride that says, we were creators before we were captives. We were thinkers before we were property. We were whole before the world called us broken. That is resurrection. It is not the denial of suffering, but the triumph over it. Reconnection also calls for responsibility. To be reborn is to take ownership of the new life. The diaspora cannot simply visit the homeland for emotional comfort. They must invest, build, teach, and uplift. Likewise, the homeland must welcome with humility, learning from those who bring different perspectives and resources. Resurrection is not about reliving the past. It is about creating a future that honors it. The Yoruba and Igbo philosophy teaches that destiny is not a gift, it is a duty. Once you remember who you are, you must live accordingly. The rebirth of a people means walking in integrity, rebuilding communities, and standing as living proof that the African spirit cannot die. The beauty of this rebirth is that it extends beyond race or geography. It is a universal truth that all people, when disconnected from their origin, lose a piece of themselves, but when they reconnect, they rise. The diaspora's journey back to Yoruba and Igbo wisdom is an example to the world that no matter how far people are scattered, they can always return to their essence. They can always resurrect what was lost, not through anger but through understanding, unity and love. And so when we say reconnection is resurrection, we are saying that the African diaspora's return is not a symbolic gesture. It is the literal revival of a civilization's heartbeat. It is the merging of the ancient and the modern, the healing of wounds time could not close, the restoration of a story that belongs to humanity itself. The drums once silenced are playing again. The languages once forbidden are being spoken again. The faces once forgotten are being remembered again. This is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of a new chapter. Reconnection is resurrection because it proves that even when history buries a people, truth will always dig them back up. The soul of Africa was never lost. It lived on in every descendant, in every rhythm, in every dream of home. Now as the diaspora stands on Yoruba and Igbo soil, they do not come as strangers or as victims. They come as children returning to their rightful inheritance. And as the land welcomes them, the ancestors whisper through the wind, "Welcome home." The silence of centuries is broken. The people have risen again. Every generation searches for answers. Answers to who they are, where they belong, and what their future holds. But too often the search begins by looking outward toward other cultures, other systems, and other ways of life. Yet for the African diaspora, the truth has always been within. The future is not a mystery waiting to be invented, it is a memory waiting to be remembered. The Yoruba and Igbo peoples understood this truth long before the world was divided by nations and borders. They taught that to move forward, one must first look backward. To build the future, one must honor the foundation of the past. This is not nostalgia, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that no tree can bear fruit unless its roots are deep and strong. When we speak of the Yoruba and the Igbo, we are speaking of civilizations that mastered the art of balance. Balance between spirit and matter, between the individual and the community, between destiny and free will. The Yoruba taught that every person is born with a purpose, a divine spark called ori that guides them through life. The Igbo believed that each person has a chi, a personal spirit that shapes one's path and destiny. These were not superstitions, they were philosophies of identity. They gave every man, woman, and child a sense of belonging and responsibility. They taught that greatness begins not with what you gain, but with what you understand about who you are. In today's world, where the diaspora struggles against systems that often deny its worth, this ancient wisdom is not outdated, it is revolutionary. It says that the answers the world seeks in technology and wealth already exist in the principles of the ancestors. The Yoruba and Igbo understood the science of community before sociology was ever studied. They understood sustainable living before the term existed. They knew that human progress was not measured by material gain but by harmony with nature, with others, and with oneself. The future, therefore, cannot be found by copying others. It must be reclaimed by rediscovering self. When the African diaspora begins to look back, not in shame but in reverence, something powerful happens. They realize they are not descendants of darkness but of light, of thinkers, builders, and visionaries. The modern world often teaches that progress requires abandoning the old, that civilization means forgetting tradition. But the Yoruba and Igbo knew the opposite to be true. Tradition was not a chain that held people back, it was the compass that kept them from losing their way. Every proverb, every ritual, every dance carried layers of knowledge about survival, unity and destiny. These teachings were never meant to be forgotten. They were meant to be passed down, adapted, and used as a map to navigate an ever-changing world. The diaspora's true power lies not in assimilation but in remembrance. When people of African descent reconnect with their ancestral philosophies, they discover that their value is not defined by external validation. It is rooted in internal truth. The Yoruba concept of Omoluabi, a person of good character, teaches that true leadership and success are not achieved by power or wealth but by integrity, humility, and service. The Igbo principle of Omona, the brotherhood of community, teaches that an individual's greatness is meaningless unless it uplifts the whole. Imagine a world where these principles shape politics, business, and education. Imagine societies that measured success not by profit but by the harmony they create. That is the future hidden in the ancestral past. For too long, the diaspora has been taught to look elsewhere for inspiration, to Western models of progress, to foreign ideologies of development. But every culture's wisdom is born from its environment, its history, its soul. The Yoruba and Igbo systems were built on the understanding of human nature and divine order. They saw no separation between the spiritual and the practical, between the seen and the unseen. This holistic vision of life is exactly what the modern world needs. As technology advances and societies become more disconnected, the ancient African understanding of interconnectedness offers the balance humanity is missing. When a young person from the diaspora learns about their Yoruba or Igbo heritage, they are not simply learning history, they are reclaiming identity. They are discovering that they come from thinkers who built kingdoms without enslaving others, who developed governance without tyranny, and who lived with respect for both elders and earth. This knowledge is fuel for the future. It gives confidence to those who were once told their past held no glory. It reminds them that before the world defined Africa, Africa defined itself through philosophy, art, music, and a moral order that valued human dignity above all else. The future of the diaspora depends on how deeply it embraces this ancestral knowledge. Without roots, progress becomes imitation. With roots, progress becomes innovation. By looking back to the wisdom of the Yoruba and Igbo, the diaspora can shape a future that is not only successful but meaningful. They can build systems that combine the best of both worlds, modern advancement with ancestral morality, technology with spirituality, independence with unity. This fusion is what will lead to the rebirth of not just a people but a global consciousness. In the ancestral past, the Yoruba and Igbo did not see humanity as separate tribes but as a network of lives woven together by destiny. They understood that no one thrives alone. The same truth must guide the diaspora now. The strength of one is the strength of all. The freedom of one is the freedom of all. When the diaspora unites with the homeland, sharing knowledge and resources, the vision of a new future takes form, one that honors the old without being trapped by it. This is the sacred balance that the ancestors perfected, the harmony that the world is yearning to feel again. To look back is not to regress, it is to recharge. It is to draw power from the well of those who came before you. The Yoruba and Igbo did not leave behind ruins. They left blueprints. They built civilizations rooted in purpose, art, and moral order. They left teachings that can guide even the most advanced societies today. And the diaspora, carrying the blood of these builders, holds the key to unlocking them again. So when we say the future is hidden in the ancestral past, we are not speaking in metaphor, we are speaking a truth written in the DNA of a people. Every generation that reconnects with its origins gains the clarity to create something timeless. Every young mind that studies the old wisdom becomes a bridge between what was and what will be. The ancestors are not gone, they are waiting to be remembered, waiting to be heard, waiting to walk again through their descent. The future of the diaspora will not be written by imitation or by rejection, but by reconciliation, by rediscovering the strength, intelligence, and divine order that has always been theirs. The past is not behind us, it is beneath us, holding us up like roots. Hold a tree. If those roots are nourished, the branches can reach the sky. But if those roots are ignored, the tree withers no matter how high it grows. The Yoruba and Igbo knew this truth and lived by it. Now it is the diaspora's turn to remember it, to carry it forward, to shape a new world rooted in ancient light, because the path to the future begins with the wisdom of the old, and only those who remember where they came from will truly know where they are going. The story of the African diaspora is no longer one of tragedy. It is one of transformation. What began in chains is ending in choice. Those once scattered are now gathering, not as victims of the past, but as visionaries of the future. The descendants of those who were uprooted and displaced are finding their way home, not through the ships that once tore them away, but through the spirit that calls them back. The story that began with displacement is now being rewritten with destiny. It is the journey from survival to purpose, from oppression to self-determination, from sorrow to strength. The people once denied their freedom are now defining their future, and in doing so, they are reclaiming what history tried to erase, their identity, their pride, and their divine right to exist with dignity. Displacement was never just about losing a physical home. It was about losing the connection to self. When men, women, and children were torn from Yoruba and Igbo lands, they weren't only separated from their families, but from their names, languages, and spiritual philosophies. They were stripped of their sense of belonging. Yet what the world failed to understand was that identity is not only carried in culture, it is carried in spirit. You can remove a person from their homeland, but you cannot remove the homeland from their soul. The essence of Yoruba and Igbo wisdom, the values of destiny, resilience, unity, and respect for life continued to live quietly in their descendants. It lived in the rhythm of the drum, in the perseverance of mothers, in the strength of fathers, and in the creativity of generations who learned to build from nothing. Even in foreign lands, even in bondage, something inside whispered, "You are more than this. You are more than what they see." As time moved forward, this whisper grew louder. It became the sound of rebellion, of hope, of determination. The descendants of the displaced began to awaken to their power. They began to look inward, not just for survival, but for this awakening marked the beginning of destiny. The realization that the pain of the past was not the end of their story. The displacement was not permanent. It was a pause. The journey that began in tragedy was now unfolding into transformation. The diaspora, spread across continents, began to reconnect not only with each other but with their roots. Through art, education, and rediscovery, they began to rebuild what was once lost. And as they learned, they began to teach the world that no amount of separation can destroy the soul of a people determined to rise. This journey from displacement to destiny is not just historical. It is spiritual. Every generation of the diaspora carries within them both the burden and the blessing of their ancestors. The burden is the memory of pain, of injustice, of centuries of dehumanization. But the blessing is resilience, an unbreakable spirit forged in fire. This spirit does not ask for pity. It demands purpose. It transforms suffering into strength and loss into legacy. When the diaspora connects again with the Yoruba and Igbo homeland, it is not a journey of return, it is a journey of completion. It is the closing of a circle, the healing of a wound that has bled across generations. The child of the displaced walks the same soil their ancestors once walked, and feels time stand still. In that moment, history breathes again and destiny is realized. The Yoruba and Igbo understood that destiny was not random. It was chosen. Every person they taught was born with a purpose, a divine assignment that gave their life meaning. That teaching lives on in the diaspora. The same fire that burned in the hearts of those who refused to give up now burns in those who are rebuilding communities, leading movements, creating art, and rediscovering truth. The very descendants of those who were enslaved are now leaders, teachers, and innovators shaping the modern world. They are using the tools of today, technology, science, and culture to honor the legacy of yesterday. In their success, they are proving that displacement may have delayed destiny, but it could never destroy it. What was broken is being rebuilt. What was scattered is being gathered. What was silenced is now being spoken again with pride and power. The beauty of destiny is that it gives meaning to pain. The suffering of the ancestors was not in vain, for through their endurance they planted seeds of strength that would bloom centuries later. Each act of survival was an act of prophecy, a silent promise that their people would rise again. And now as the diaspora reconnects with the Yoruba and Igbo roots, that prophecy is being fulfilled. The languages once forbidden are being learned again. The traditions once suppressed are being celebrated again. The pride once buried is being reclaimed again. The people who were told they had no history are now teaching the world about one of the richest and oldest histories on earth. This is what destiny looks like. Not the denial of the past, but the transformation of it into purpose. To move from displacement to destiny requires vision. It requires the courage to see beyond pain, to look at the scars and understand that they are not signs of defeat, but of endurance. The diaspora's journey back to self is not easy. It comes with challenges, misunderstandings, disillusionments, and the heavy weight of reconciliation. Yet every challenge is part of the cleansing process. Every moment of struggle brings greater clarity. Every effort to reconnect brings deeper understanding. Destiny is not found in comfort, it is revealed through persistence. The Yoruba and Igbo ancestors knew this truth, and they lived by it. They taught that no storm lasts forever, and no night can silence the dawn. The diaspora now carries that same truth into a new era, an era of self-awareness, creation and unity. What was once displacement has become divine direction. Those who were taken have become the ones who return. Those who were once silenced have become the ones who speak. The same hands that were forced to build another man's empire are now building their own nations of thought, of progress, of pride. The African diaspora has turned pain into prophecy, exile into empowerment. They are not just survivors of history, they are authors of destiny. Their story is not finished, because the future they are creating is bigger than the past they endured. Every child who learns their true heritage, every voice that reclaims its power, every connection that bridges the diaspora with the homeland, these are all signs of destiny unfolding. The journey from displacement to destiny is the story of rebirth itself. It is the testament that no force can erase a people's purpose. It reminds the world that what begins in darkness can still find the light, and that what was once scattered can still be gathered again under the name of truth. The diaspora is no longer lost. It is being led by memory, by pride, by purpose. And as it finds its way back to the Yoruba and Igbo homeland, it carries with it a new vision for humanity, that no matter how far we are taken, no matter how deeply we are wounded, destiny will always find its way home.